On the subject of business, how did you go from having a job to starting one of the coolest companies, as far as I'm concerned, on the planet? And I'd really love to know like the story of how you put on your first race and what happened.
Okay. So I had an early business that I started in my early 20s called Planet Fear that ultimately went bust after 7 years of running it. And that was a very painful, elemental learning experience for me about how not to run a business. As a result of that, I found myself suddenly without a focus and a bit of day work to do. I was like a free agent, having been really tied to running this first business. So Planet Fear was a .com era bricks and clicks adventure sport kind of website, retailer, publisher, holiday provider. It was climbing, mountain biking, running, core adventure sports. And we had an online shop. We had a physical shop in Sheffield. And the essential business model was publish content for free. We were too ambitious for what we wanted to do, and we overreached in a critical period. And as many entrepreneurs learn, cash is king, and we had a very rapid period of growth and ran out of cash. It was a fairly harsh, brutal lesson to learn, to see something you'd worked so hard to build to fail. But something positive came out of it. I ended up doing some years of consultancy work in the outdoor trade, generally sales, marketing, product development stuff, very ad hoc group of brands that I worked with, but many different brands as well. And one of the brands, this is the serendipitous moment, was Berghaus. And they had an idea to create their own event, which Berghaus would own, rather than them sponsoring an event and I guess enriching, if you can call it that, event organizers. And whilst they had some good ideas, they were smart enough to realize that before maybe they commit to this course of action, maybe getting an external opinion on it would be a good idea. And so they literally 2 days of consultancy to just sense check their event plans. And I basically said to them, you're an apparel business. I think you would be a big step into the unknown to try and create and manage and own your own event. And I think you should sponsor stuff. Just you need to make slightly different decisions about how you sponsor things. And by the way, would you like to sponsor the Dragon's Back? So during the days that I was doing this work for Berghaus, I was reading this absolutely iconic fell running book called Feet in the Clouds. And it has this amazing chapter about the original 1992 Dragon's Back race. And the race happened once. It became absolutely legendary. It entered fell and ultra running kind of legendary status folklore because it was incredibly tough. It was really the only race of its type at the time in 1992. And the outright winner as a mixed pair was Helen Whitaker and Martin Stone. And so Helen, running with Martin, beat many of the best ultra runners in the world. So it's one of those rare examples when you have an outright female winner of a race. As I was doing this work for Berghaus, I realized next year would be the 20th anniversary from the original race, so 2012. And I suggested to them that I could resurrect this event, and would they like to sponsor it? And they pretty much said yes, that then and there. So I had the gem of an idea and a sponsor. I did have some experience of organizing races. So during this kind of ad hoc period of consultancy work, I did quite a lot of work for Rat Race Adventure and organized some of their events. And that was a fantastic period of learning for me. And so I went into Dragon's Back Race with some experience, but actually quite naive about what I had actually taken on. The logistics of Dragon's Back are absolutely phenomenal. It's a very complex event to deliver. And over the next 12 months, prepared to do the first event, I just kept uncovering challenge and problem one after the other. But we did do the first event and it went pretty well. And it was the foundation stone for the whole business.
I'm so glad I asked. That's really interesting, and serendipity is a fabulous thing. But also sounds like you just have been putting all the right things together in terms of your experience and places to just be able to like seize the opportunity.
I didn't come into it as a novice. Over 10 years later, I feel like I'm a pretty competent, experienced race director. But back then, I kind of just about knew enough to know what I didn't know, but only just.
Yeah. Did you have like a mission in general that you wanted to get to? Was it just sort of really intrigued by the original Dragon's Back and wanting to recreate that and start stuff? And did you have a plan for a business that it would become afterwards? Or was it actually this would be sick to organize and maybe it would be like a 2-3 year project?
I just thought, Dragon's Back, resurrect that. That'll keep me busy for 18 months. Why not? Sounds like a great challenge. And I really like personal challenges that I have a chance of failing at. And I thought this is going to be really hard to pull off. And I really like the idea of having a challenge to keep me occupied and really fulfilled and focused. A part of this story as well is just before I started really working on Dragon's Back, I had just finished a very intense period of consultancy work for Innovate, fell and trail running shoe brand. And at that point, I was leading their marketing team, but as an external consultant. And it was a fantastic period to work for Innovate because they were expanding and growing so quickly. Everything was going right for the brand in many ways. I mean, there were challenges, but it was a very exciting period. And I'd managed to save a reasonable amount of money doing that work. And when I started on Dragon's Back, I basically had enough money in the bank to pay myself or not to work for a year or so. And I thought, why not? Let's do Dragon's Back. Let's create something new. So I was able to focus really 100% on the Dragon's Back and try to put in place those building blocks.
It's another thing I guess we haven't spoken too much about with risk, but it's a lot easier to do big things like sort of starting a business and stuff when you kind of have a bit more of a safety net or like the capacity to take risk. I guess if you didn't have finances for a year, trying to start it would have been a bit more difficult and things.
Actually, the first Dragon's Back was a financial failure. I can remember it lost £12,000. And I got to the end of the event, having organised the event. I hadn't paid myself a penny. So this is a financial failure without paying for any time. It was a bit of a shock, a bit of a wake-up call about how difficult it is to deliver a live event with many elements that are outside of your control. And that I think anyone who organises events, particularly trying to do them professionally, will understand exactly where I'm coming from.